Welcome to Tom's True Crime. Today we take you to Billings, Montana. September 4th, 2009. It was Labor Day weekend. A retired wildlife officer was hunting up on the prairie when he spotted something curious. Animals were digging around in the area, which interested him to find out what they were digging up. He went and began digging a little further and found what he believed to be human remains. Investigators with the Billings County Sheriff's Office were soon on the scene. They pulled up, and the wildlife officer pointed out to them where he had been digging. Investigators walked over to the site where they saw what appeared to be a human skull. If a person is buried in a small, shallow grave, foul play is probably involved. Before investigators could figure out who put the body there, they have to identify it, which led the investigators at the scene to make a couple of calls. One was to a forensic anthropologist. A forensic anthropologist uses clues from the skeleton to identify somebody or help identify somebody. The other was to the Billings police. Investigators contacted the Billings Police Department investigation sergeant and asked him if he had any missing persons cases they were working. And the answer the investigator got just might have been the break he needed. They did have a missing person under some suspicious circumstances. The Billings police were currently investigating the disappearance of 30-year-old Ivan Jerrow, the victim of an alleged kidnapping. His girlfriend, Evelyn Kolarova, had reported that Ivan was taken by some Mexican nationals. She said they were going to kill him. Did the body in the shallow grave mean the kidnappers had carried out their threat? Or was there another reason that someone would want Ivan dead? A secret that only his 24-year-old girlfriend Evelyn knew. Born in 1985, Evelyn Kolarova started life in Tucson, Arizona, the middle of three sisters. It wasn't a happy childhood. Her father was on drugs. It was frightening, depressing, and frustrating, seeing the abuse. Evelyn's mother and sisters live in fear, not knowing what was happening next. And when Evelyn's father went to prison on drug charges in 1993, her mother Jenna was determined to give her kids a better life. Evelyn's father had a 3-year sentence. Jenna took the opportunity and left. Jenna had suffered physical and verbal abuse at the hands of her husband. Jenna was trying to break the chain. To make that break, Jenna took the girls to Montana. Jenna wanted to be with her family, so she moved back to Billings, Montana. She got an apartment, a job at the nursing home, and they started doing well. However, while her mother was able to make a fresh start, the transition was difficult on 10-year-old Evelyn, who had a hard time adjusting to her new town and new school. Evelyn felt like an outcast. As a result, she formed a tight bond with her younger sister, Marianne, who was only 8. Evelyn and Marianne were really close. They always took care of each other. And eventually, they not only adjusted to life in Billings, they excelled. They were ahead in school. They loved it. Evelyn and her sister also did well after school in gymnastics and ballet. Being raised by a single mother, the girls had to help out at home. They had to do their own laundry because Jenna was working 2 jobs. And that was how in 1999, 14-year-old Evelyn first met Ivan Jerrow. 6 years older than Evelyn, Ivan's family had been in Billings for generations. It's a multi-generation town where your great-great-grandparents grew up, and now you grow up here. There are always family reunions. In his immediate family, Ivan was one of 3 brothers. Ivan and his brothers and father were close, worked on cars all the time. They were not licensed, but they worked on cars for family and friends. In 1999, after graduating high school, the aspiring mechanic got his own apartment, which is where he met Evelyn. Evelyn was doing the laundry, and she met Ivan in the laundry room. She made quite an impression on Ivan. Ivan went to Evelyn's apartment with flowers and wanted to see Evelyn. Ivan was begging Jenna to let him date her daughter. Jenna told him he was too old. He was 21, she was 14. Jenna told Ivan to stay away from Evelyn. But despite being forbidden to see him by her mother, Evelyn and Ivan's relationship blossomed. Jenna had to work, so she was unaware Evelyn was meeting with Ivan after school. Evelyn thought Ivan was everything. He's older and has a car, and she was easily impressed with all that. By the time she was 15, Evelyn was pregnant. She said she was in love and she wanted to have his child. It appeared that Ivan was ecstatic as well. They were very happy, excited, and very loving. Despite her family's objections, Evelyn moved in with Ivan. As long as she was with Ivan, nothing could faze her. Evelyn gave birth to a daughter in 2000 and dropped out of school to take care of her little girl. Evelyn let go of everything, and the baby and Ivan were her priority. In 2002, At the age of 17, Evelyn gave birth to a second daughter. Ivan was a proud father of two little girls, and Evelyn was a mother raising her two children. Despite her initial objections, Evelyn's mother warmed to Ivan, and after the birth of her grandchildren, gradually accepted him as part of the family. They were very happy for the first 2 years, just normal, being a couple, taking care of the babies. They may have been happy, but the young couple did have some issues to overcome. Despite having two children to take care of, Ivan seldom held down a regular job. He worked in Walmart for a little while, and he earned some money as a shade tree mechanic. At one point, Evelyn had to take a part-time job at a gas station to make ends meet. Evelyn could only earn minimum wage, given she didn't even finish high school. She tried several times to get her GED, but with two kids to raise, she struggled to make that happen. And at the age of 20, after getting pregnant with her third child, Evelyn put finishing her education on hold once more. Evelyn seemed happy about being pregnant. Evelyn had the baby, a little boy, in 2005. Ivan was over the moon. Ivan was ecstatic to have his son to carry on the last name Jerrow. They seemed happy. She had her two little girls, and Ivan had his little boy. And life was going to be this simple but happy life from then on. By the time they had been together nearly 10 years, Evelyn and Ivan had built a family and seemed to be planning their future. On August 11, 2009, the police in Billings, Montana received a curious call concerning Evelyn Kolarova's boyfriend. They received information that a gentleman by the name of Ivan Jerrow had gone missing. Somebody is reporting that they hadn't seen Ivan Jerrow for 2 or 3 weeks. Exactly who reported the 30-year-old missing remained a mystery. With Crime Stoppers, everybody that calls in remain anonymous. However, the caller did say they suspected Ivan hadn't just disappeared. They felt there might have been some foul play involved. When investigators did a quick check, running Ivan's name through their database, it looked as if the caller might have had a point. He had an extensive history with the public police department. When investigators were looking into his lifestyle, he had some drug charges. Ivan's rap sheet included charges for possession of marijuana and cocaine, a few distribution arrests, and a few assault charges. But he had never spent more than a day or two in jail. The fact that Ivan had a record immediately had the investigators wondering, could Crime Stoppers caller be right? Was Ivan's sudden disappearance the result of foul play? Because of his lifestyle, there's high likelihood of something bad that could have happened, especially since he had a history of selling drugs. Or could there be another explanation for his disappearance? Maybe Ivan was simply laying low for some reason. It is always the possibility that Ivan doesn't want to be found. It's not illegal to be missing. Some individuals don't want to be contacted, and it's not illegal to do that. Or could he have gone out of town on a drug run? When the investigators ran Ivan's vehicle registration, they got the first clue about his possible whereabouts, or at least the whereabouts of his van. The van was found abandoned on I-25 south of Raton, New Mexico. Was the abandoned van more evidence of foul play? The authorities in New Mexico didn't think so. The New Mexico State Police said the fan belt is broken and probably overheated, so it was left on the side of the road. Ivan's abandoned van appeared to be a dead end. Running the registration did give them his address, though. When the investigators went to check it out, it wasn't Ivan or Evelyn Kolarova, Ivan's 24-year-old girlfriend and the mother of his 3 children who met them at the door. A male by the name of Jobbons who answered the door. He was a friend of the family, according to what he told the investigator. He had a girlfriend, common-law wife, and they had kids, and their kids and Evelyn and Ivan's kids. They would all play together. Diego at the time said that Evelyn wasn't there. And as they were speaking, Evelyn pulled up in a vehicle. When the investigator explained why he was there, that someone had called Crime Stoppers to report Ivan missing, Evelyn said that was more or less true. She says that they had gotten into an argument a couple weeks prior, and he loaded up a bunch of his stuff in his van and left. According to Evelyn, she hadn't heard from Ivan since, and she said that was just fine with her. His drug dealing wasn't the only reason she was glad he was gone. She tells investigators that they did not have a good relationship. There was a lot of domestic violence. She spelled out some pretty horrific treatment from Ivan. At one point, she told investigators that he had started choking her out and was telling her that he was going to kill her, and he stopped choking her right when she was about to pass out. She said that he looked at her and told her he didn't want to kill her by choking her because when people die like that, they urinate and defecate on themselves. And he didn't want to have to clean up her mess. But if Ivan had done such terrible things, Could that mean Evelyn had something to do with his disappearance? She reassured investigators that she still loved him and she would never hurt him. For the moment, the investigators didn't have any evidence Evelyn had done anything to Ivan. They can't prove or disprove Evelyn's story. The investigators then spoke to Ivan's father. He didn't seem all that worried about his son being missing either. According to the father, Ivan would go missing for weeks at a time. In fact, according to his father, Evelyn wasn't the only one who had parted with Ivan on bad terms. He tells investigators that the last time he had seen Ivan, they had gotten into a heated argument about a vehicle that they co-owned together. And Ivan had gotten upset and mad and left and hasn't spoken with him since. Alongside what Evelyn had already told them, his father's story had the investigators wondering whether Ivan was missing at all. With those two stories, it seems Ivan's not getting along with a lot of people in his life. Maybe he did choose to put some distance between himself and the people that he seemed to be having rocky relationships with. Both stories seem to fit with what the investigators already knew about Ivan. He had a history. There was some drug-dealing history. He was a violent person. His volatile past and previous run-ins with the law might have tempted the authorities to simply stop looking into Ivan's disappearance. It's not something that they're going to call out the troops and start a grid search for him. But there was still that nagging possibility of foul play. Therefore, the investigators made one final attempt to track down Ivan's whereabouts via his cell phone records. Selling illegal drugs, they rely heavily on their phones for their business. And if Ivan was still using his phone, it offered the police a chance to find him. Cell phone data could not necessarily get an exact location, but you could find what particular cell tower was transmitting data to a particular phone. And based on that tower, you could estimate the location of a particular call. When the investigators pulled Ivan's phone records, it revealed what they expected. The small-time drug dealer used his phone heavily. The biggest thing that stood out to investigators was there was hundreds of hours of use right up to July 27th, approximately 2 weeks before the Crime Stoppers call that kicked off the missing persons case. From that day on, all that activity stops. That's a huge red flag. At that point, the investigators suspected it was a homicide case. By August 27, 2009, it had been more than 2 weeks since the Billings, Montana Police Department had received an anonymous Crime Stoppers call reporting 30-year-old Ivan Jerrow missing. Neither his father nor his girlfriend, 24-year-old Evelyn Kolarova, had seen him recently, not since he'd stormed out during an argument. It appears that him and Evelyn had a very rocky relationship because there were many reports of domestic violence type calls. The rocky relationship could have given Ivan a reason to simply leave, but the investigators were starting to wonder if there might be another explanation for why he had abandoned his van and stopped using his phone. Investigators began to suspect foul play was involved. Was Ivan's criminal activity to blame? Ivan Jerrow apparently made his living by selling drugs. He was selling anything from marijuana to cocaine and using the products himself. Or could his alleged abuse of Evelyn have something to do with it? There could be some motivation for retaliation. On August 27th, Evelyn dropped by the police department. She seemed genuinely concerned about him. She started off by asking investigators if they had heard from Ivan. Investigators said no. And that's when Evelyn dropped a bombshell. She said, "I hadn't been 100% honest with you." According to Evelyn, what she told them earlier about Ivan leaving after an argument wasn't true, because she'd been reluctant to tell the police what Ivan had really been up to. She then goes into telling investigators how Ivan makes runs to Mexico, picking up drugs, bringing them back to Billings and selling them. On his latest trip, according to Evelyn, Ivan had gotten into a serious jam. She received a call from him saying that he's in trouble and he needs some money. There was a big narcotics transaction taking place, and he had messed that deal up. So he owed these guys a lot of money. Evelyn said that she tried to get some cash but couldn't. And a few days later, Ivan had come home escorted by 4 henchmen of the drug dealer he owed money. Evelyn said that 4 Mexican nationals showed up at their house. Ivan loaded some of his personal property in his van. A gun safe that contained several firearms, large screen TV, some tools, and a refrigerator. They drove off. She said that was the last time she had seen him. It was a frightening story. But was it true? His drug-dealing background lent a little credence to her story. So did the fact that his van had been found ditched along the road between Billings and Mexico. It makes sense. It might have been in transit down there, or they may have taken Ivan down there. When investigators spoke to Ivan and Evelyn's neighbors, one neighbor had seen something similar to what Evelyn described. She had seen a black Jeep Wrangler a number of days prior, pulling up with a number of people loading what appeared to be personal items, including TV and a large gun safe, into the Jeep Wrangler and then drive off. However, according to the neighbor, Ivan was nowhere to be seen. The neighbor says, "I saw Evelyn and some other people loading those items." That wasn't all the neighbor had seen. It turned out that Evelyn hadn't been lying when she said Ivan had disappeared after a fight. One of the last times that they had seen Ivan, they witnessed Ivan and Evelyn in an argument, screaming match out in the street, and then it turned physical. Ivan was dragging Evelyn back to the house by her hair. That piqued everybody's interest. Maybe she had done something, self-defense or something had happened. But it was a few days later, on September 2nd, when the investigators tried to get back in touch with Evelyn, that things really got interesting. She had moved out of the house. She had left in a hurry. The cupboards were open and things thrown about the house. It's like they had run away in the middle of the night. The fact that Evelyn appeared to be on the run gave new urgency to the investigation into Ivan's disappearance. But then on September 5th, a call to the Billings County Sheriff's Office would move the investigation into a disturbing new direction. The call came from a retired wildlife officer who had been out hunting that morning and stumbled onto a gruesome discovery. They found possibly human remains buried in rural Billings County. The remains were badly decomposed, but sheriff's investigators were able to tentatively identify the gender of the deceased. They were able to determine it was potentially a male. And hoping for a lead on the dead man's identity, the sheriff's investigators started reaching out to area law enforcement. They immediately began looking at missing persons, which eventually led them to the investigator looking into Ivan Jerrow's disappearance. The Lieutenant James Husak contacted sheriff's investigators and told them about some remains that had been found in a rural area of Billings. But was it Ivan? Hoping for confirmation, the sheriff's investigators brought in a forensic anthropologist to examine the remains. The decomposition pattern is consistent with somebody who hasn't been seen for a month. And whoever the dead man was, it appeared that he had been murdered. There's a peculiar blunt trauma pattern injuries on his cranium. There were 3 impacts. There were 2 on the front of the face and 1 behind the ear. When it came to identifying the corpse, the investigators got lucky. On his hand, there was enough skin that they could get a fingerprint, and they were able to identify the remains as Ivan Jerrow. 5 weeks after he disappeared, the search for Ivan had become a homicide investigation. Obviously, Evelyn's a potential suspect. But where was she? Word on the street was that to find her, the police should track down 29-year-old Diego Jobbons, the so-called family friend. He had answered Evelyn's door back in August when the police first went looking for Ivan. They are spending a lot of time together, even to the point that they are living together. And that left the investigators wondering, was it a new relationship or did it have something to do with Ivan's death? When they dug into Ivan Jerrow's life, they could tell he was a very jealous person, very violent person, not somebody who would put up with another man being with the mother of his children. Whatever had happened, the investigators were anxious to talk to Diego, and they would get their chance on September 14th. He walks into the police department, wanted to talk about the case. Obviously, the word got out to Diego that the police were looking for him. Once Diego sat down with the investigators, he claimed that he had nothing to hide, opening up about how he knew Ivan Jerrow. Diego even went as far as to tell investigators that he would help Ivan with his narcotics business. Ivan would bring the loads of marijuana to Billings, and Diego Jobbons helped him sell the marijuana. However, Diego was doing more than that. He and Evelyn were having sexual relations when Ivan was making those narcotics trips. He was living with Evelyn while Ivan was gone. As soon as Ivan would show back up, Diego's out of the picture. They just had a love triangle. And Diego ended up falling for Evelyn. That wasn't the plan. It ended up being more than just messing around with somebody, or just a one-time thing. So he ended up with Evelyn. He wanted to take care of her. He really genuinely cared for her. And he told the investigators that Ivan treated her horribly. He was a witness to the abuse. He was definitely a witness to the violence that Ivan was prone to. However, he denied having anything to do with Ivan's death. Police think he's trying to outsmart them, outthink them, and he's trying to put himself in a position to not get in trouble. He was trying to, in some ways, protect Evelyn by explaining the violence that Ivan was capable of and the violence that he had witnessed. But if he was trying to protect Evelyn and himself, Diego may have made a serious mistake. At one point in the interview, he made a passing reference to something that immediately caught the investigators' attention. He gave them a piece of information that ended up making the case. He told investigators that he had rented a storage unit and that Evelyn had stored some of her property in there. When the investigators got a search warrant for the storage unit, they made a surprising discovery. In the unit were items that she tells investigators Ivan had taken with him with the Mexican nationals. However, the tools, TVs, and other valuables the drug dealer's henchmen had allegedly taken weren't the most damning thing the investigators found. They found a mattress. It was a large stain of blood and tissue and bone. On September 14, 2009, 9 days after finding Evelyn Kolarova's boyfriend, Ivan Jerrow, buried in a shallow grave outside of town, the Billings, Montana police made a major breakthrough in the case. One that came courtesy of Evelyn's lover, Diego Jobbons. It's this weird love triangle going on there. During an interview with the police, Diego had accidentally mentioned that he had rented a storage unit for Evelyn. It wasn't his intention, but he slipped up. The day after finding the mattress, the investigators went to Ivan and Evelyn's house with another search warrant and luminol. When the investigators sprayed luminol in Evelyn and Ivan's bedroom, the results were astonishing. There was cast-off blood on the ceiling. Something very violent had happened in that house. The bloody ceiling, coupled with the bloody mattress from the storage unit, led the investigators to an inescapable conclusion. The house was the murder scene. From there, search warrants went out for the arrest of Evelyn and Diego. Could the investigators find them? It had been almost 2 weeks since Evelyn and Diego had moved out of her house and gone into hiding. Shortly after the judge signed the arrest warrants, Evelyn and her mother happened to show up at the storage unit, totally unaware that the police had just searched it. Obviously, they were there to remove the stuff that was in the storage unit. While they were getting into the garage, the police approached them, guns drawn. They put Evelyn in the car. Evelyn told the detectives to take the handcuffs off her mother. She had nothing to do with this. Evelyn had a look of resignation on her face and said that she wanted to talk and tell police the truth about what happened. She didn't want anybody else getting into trouble. Taken into custody and brought in for questioning, Evelyn didn't deny killing Ivan. She told investigators that the story about the Mexican nationals was not true. Evelyn wanted to talk about the abuse she had suffered over the years. He was beating her up every day, no matter what she did. One incident in particular that stands out is he laid out some plastic on the floor of the house, stripped her of her clothes. So she was naked on the plastic, and he poured some type of accelerant on her, told her he was going to set her on fire. However, she never left Ivan, who she had been with since the age of 14. Evelyn said she loved him so much, she begged him to be normal and not to hit her, not to do drugs. He would tell her he would, and then he would go back to the old violent Ivan. Everybody always asked her, "Why don't you get help? Why don't you go to the cops?" He had been charged with domestic violence before. Nothing had ever happened. Law enforcement, in her mind, they hadn't done anything to protect her from Ivan. Evelyn pointed out the police couldn't even make drug charges stick. Nobody could touch him. He had a criminal record, but he still just did whatever he wanted all of the time. Evelyn said she had not considered running away an option either. He was always saying he threatened to kill Evelyn's family. He said he will kill Evelyn's sister. He will kill her mother. Evelyn thought if she ran away, Ivan will kill her family. So according to Evelyn, she had suffered in silence for years. Evelyn was so demoralized, mentally abused, physically abused, and dominated by Ivan. Then the discussion turned to the beginning of August 2009. She said that on the night that he died, Ivan was in a particularly foul mood. He told her that he wanted to have sex, and she didn't want to have sex. She said, "No, get away from me." He raped her. Evelyn said that once that whole episode of violence was over, he took a bunch of pills and went to sleep. Evelyn didn't sleep, however. Instead, she told the police that Ivan's brutal rape had been a wake-up call. She has had enough. Once Ivan had passed out, she knew that was her opportunity. She picked up the heaviest thing she could find. Evelyn said that she used a weight bar to beat Ivan. She hit him as hard as she could. Ivan moved, but he wasn't up. So she hit him again and again. He didn't move anymore. Evelyn said that Ivan's death had sent her into shock. She couldn't believe it. She kept waiting for him to get up and to get her, and he didn't. She thought it was fake. It wasn't really happening. She felt like she wasn't there. She was in a fog, or she didn't really believe it was taking place. But eventually the fact that Ivan was really dead had sunk in, leaving Evelyn in a dilemma. She didn't know what to do. She found the biggest thing she had. It was a large plastic storage tub, according to Evelyn. She pulled him off the bed and she put him in it, and she stuffed him in there. Then she said that she dragged the storage container into the back of the van and drove it out to the edge of town. She pulled over and she started digging, and she got tired. So she stopped, she threw him in there and covered him up and walked away. Evelyn said she was also the one who ditched Ivan's van along the roadside in New Mexico. She drove it by herself, something broke and started smoking. Once back in Billings, Evelyn said she had come up with a story about Ivan and the Mexican drug dealers in order to cover her tracks. Everybody believed her because he had been doing the drug trafficking for so long. And Diego, did he have anything to do with the murder? According to Evelyn, the only thing he did was help her move Ivan's things into storage. She said nobody helped her get rid of Ivan. And while the investigators were moved by what she had been through, they doubted that part of her story, that she had acted alone, was true. Evelyn Kolarova would not have the physical strength to lift Ivan Jerrow's body into the vehicle. Investigators believed Diego was involved as well. But for the moment, Evelyn's confession was enough to charge her with murder. Her statement matched up with the crime scene and the evidence recovered from the storage unit. By August 5, 2011, it had been almost 2 years since Evelyn Kolarova admitted to killing her boyfriend, Ivan Jerrow. She had been physically assaulted and then sexually assaulted by Ivan Jerrow. While he was sleeping, she bludgeoned him to death. However, contrary to her confession, Evelyn hadn't acted entirely alone. Questioned after Evelyn's arrest, her sister Marianne told police that she, her husband, Tony, and Evelyn's lover Diego Jobbons had all helped dispose of the body. Evelyn confided in Marianne and Diego. Tony and Evelyn end up going over to the house. They do put Ivan's body in a tote like Evelyn described. By August 2011, all three had pleaded guilty to accessory to murder charges, and all but Marianne received 3 years sentences. Marianne, in exchange for what she had told prosecutors, she received a sentence of probation. But what would Evelyn's confession end up costing her? The murder charge can carry a life sentence. Taking Evelyn's case to trial could be risky, though, considering the circumstances. Evelyn exhibited all the signs of a battered spouse. So in 2011, the prosecutors offered Evelyn a deal. She agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder, which left the 26-year-old mother of 3 facing 10 to 30 years in prison. The sentence was essentially left open to the court or the judge. At her sentencing hearing on August 5th, Evelyn made a plea for leniency. She could present her side of the story, offer witnesses and testimony to the nature of her and Ivan Jerrow's relationship. Evelyn described incidents of abuse where he was asking her questions. He would heat a knife up, and if she responded with the wrong answer, that knife went against her back. She stood up and showed the scars in court. The court imposed a sentence of 20 years for the charge of second-degree murder. 20 years was a bitter disappointment for Evelyn's family. They wanted a lesser sentence. The prosecutors said that they sympathized with what she went through, but a murder was committed. They can't look the other way on that. Had she come forward after it happened, she would not necessarily have gotten off, but things would have been different. Evelyn Kolarova was released on parole in May 2021. She was discharged from parole in March 2024. She was 38 years old. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Tom's True Crime. If you are interested in more in-depth investigations into the most perplexing crimes, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. What are your thoughts about this case? Please share them with us in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe.